Well, now, when you look back, also, let me mention, we mentioned the word and the name Jerry Ford a minute ago. You actually were state chairman in the 50s when Jerry Ford was a congressman, so you
Yes.
must have known him
Yes.
for a long time. What was your impression of Gerald R. Ford?
I had a delightful impression of him. He asked me to serve on the Gerald R. Ford Foundation
Right.
board.
Right.
And I did that for a number of years and enjoyed it, enjoyed working on the matters that foundation supported, and enjoyed the relationships with President Ford and Betty Ford.
I want to ask you one more question. Bow ties. Bow ties. Now, Soapy Williams was famous for his green and white polka dot bow ties, but you were famous for bow ties, and you're wearing one right now.
Yeah.
Who came first, you or Soapy?
You know, that was treated by one of my law school buddies, Al Thorburn. I wore bow ties while I was in law school. I don't know when Soapy started wearing them, but so I don't know who was first. But after Soapy was elected governor, Al Thorburn said, "Larry, you need something," and I've composed an affidavit that I knew you before and that you have worn bow ties for years, and I want you to have it and display it so that you put these stories to rest. And so he sent me that affidavit, and I had it under glass in my office in Stockbridge for a number of years.
That certified it, actually.
That
made it official.
That made it official.
That
Yes,
made it
it
official.
did.
Well, let me ask you, just in closing, if you had to look back at the grand sweep of politics in this country from post-World War II to the present time, and where the Republican Party has come from and where it's been and where it's going, and the Democratic Party, how do you look at the whole scene right now and at what you saw for the last half century, the evolution? You've seen it all.
Well, I've lived through a lot of it, and that just comes from surviving. But I've got to confess that politics bothers me today. I think that the intensity of the opposition seems to be well received by the public, but I can't believe that it's good for the country. And I just wish that there was a higher level of civility. You can disagree on philosophy and on policy and on the specifics of various governmental matters without fighting a war. I'm troubled by these candidates that now say, "I will fight for you." And I think government has got to have less fight and more reasoning. And
in other words, instead of politicians taking up the cudgel on behalf of one or more interest groups, they should be dispassionate representatives of the public interest and make balanced and reasoned decisions on what needs to be done.
You can't be totally dispassionate, Bill. I guess probably that's not something that a human being can do. If you're totally dispassionate, probably you're out of the loop. And but I think the degree of antagonism, the elements of nastiness that creep in every now and then, and so forth, are
regrettable.
Are unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, one last question on that. Do you think philosophically the differences between the Republicans and the Democrats now are on balance pretty much the same as they were post-World War II? I mean, forget the animosity and the personal vitriol. Is it kind of still basically true that the Republican Party is the more conservative of the two and the Democratic Party the more liberal? Are there any other nuances that you could point to that strike you as being kind of ironically different than they were when you were coming up in politics?
I think that there is a greater degree of difference between factions within the Republican Party. I think that some of the very conservative elements in the Republican Party
Today
were not there
back in the 50s
when
and 40s.
in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And
are you saying that the differences between, let's say, a progressive, moderate Republican like George Romney in the late 1950s, early 60s, and the more conservative elements of the Republican Party were not as pronounced or vitriolic as they seem to be today between, let's say, the religious right, arch conservatives in the Republican Party and the more middle-of-the-road Republicans?
I would say that, yes. And I am not in a position to make judgments about divisions within the Democratic Party. I'm sure that they have them too, but I am troubled by some of the hyperactivity on the part of ultra-conservatives.
Right.
I guess I would be more in the middle, in the moderate gender.
Right. Larry Lindemer, I want to thank you so much for your appearance here with the Michigan Political History Society. It has been a pure pleasure.